I declare in this new decade that everyone in your house will come to know God.
The son of well-known preacher Joel Osteen is suddenly at the center of a heated debate after making a statement that no one expected. He claims that tithing may not actually be biblical, a remark that has left many questioning long-held teachings inside Lakewood Church. His words quickly sparked controversy, raising concerns, curiosity, and confusion about what this could mean for the church's future direction and beliefs going forward. A new voice, challenging an empire of belief. Growing up as the child of one of the most influential Christian leaders in the world does not always guarantee that you will follow the same path. In fact, sometimes it leads in the opposite direction entirely. That is exactly why Jonathan Osteen's recent statements have captured so much attention. Raised under the shadow of Joel Osteen's global ministry, Jonathan is now beginning to speak in a way that is both unexpected and unsettling for many within the faith community. Joel Osteen built Lakewood Church into a worldwide spiritual movement centered on positivity, hope, and the belief that faith often leads to personal and financial success. Over the years, millions have been drawn to his uplifting messages, making Lakewood one of the largest and most influential churches in the world. His teachings have shaped a generation of believers who associate spirituality with breakthrough, blessing, and prosperity. But now, Jonathan appears to be questioning one of the foundational practices tied to that system, particularly the idea of tithing. His recent comments suggesting that tithing may not be biblically required have triggered strong reactions, not only among followers of Lakewood Church, but also across the broader Christian community. For many, this is more than just a different opinion. It feels like a direct challenge to a long-standing structure of belief. What makes this situation even more intriguing is not just what Jonathan said, but who he is. Many assumed he would naturally continue his father's legacy, possibly even stepping into a larger leadership role within Lakewood Church in the future. Instead, his perspective seems to be moving in a different direction entirely, one that raises difficult questions about tradition, interpretation, and the evolution of faith itself. Rather than fully rejecting his father's teachings, Jonathan appears to be shifting the focus. Instead of emphasizing prosperity and individual success, he is drawing attention toward issues that are often overlooked in traditional church conversations. Topics such as mental health, social responsibility, and the struggles of younger generations seem to be at the center of his growing message. This shift is creating tension between preserving established teachings and adapting to modern realities. And that is where things begin to get complicated. Because if Jonathan's perspective continues to grow, it could signal something much bigger than a personal disagreement. It could represent a quiet turning point inside Lakewood Church itself. A place once defined by inspiration and success-driven faith may now be facing pressure to evolve into something more socially aware and emotionally grounded. Younger audiences, in particular, appear to resonate with this direction. Many of them are no longer satisfied with messages centered only on success and material blessings, and instead, they are looking for faith that acknowledges real-life struggles, uncertainty, and mental well-being. Jonathan's emerging voice seems to be speaking directly into that gap. Still, not everyone is convinced this shift is positive. For some, it feels like a departure from the very foundation that made Lakewood Church what it is today. For others, it may be exactly the kind of disruption needed to keep the church relevant in a rapidly changing world. And as this tension builds, one question begins to linger in the background. Is Jonathan simply expressing personal views? Or is he quietly signaling the beginning of a much larger transformation inside Lakewood Church? Because what happens next may not just redefine his role. It may redefine the entire direction of the ministry itself. And as we move deeper into this unfolding story, Jonathan's influence inside Lakewood Church is becoming impossible to ignore. Jonathan Osteen's quiet rise inside Lakewood Church. While most people recognize Lakewood Church for its global reach and Joel Osteen's powerful sermons, there is another figure gradually stepping into a more visible role behind the scenes. Jonathan Osteen has not only grown up within the church environment, but he is also slowly building his own identity inside it, particularly through music and worship leadership. At Lakewood Church, worship is not just a segment of the service. It is a major emotional and spiritual experience for the congregation. Jonathan plays an important role in shaping that atmosphere. As part of the worship team, he helps guide moments that are meant to bring people into a deeper sense of connection, not just through lyrics or melody, but through emotional engagement with faith itself. What makes Jonathan's approach stand out is how he blends modern musical styles with traditional worship elements. Instead of sticking strictly to older hymn-based structures, he incorporates a more contemporary sound that resonates strongly with younger attendees. This blend has created a bridge between generations, allowing both longtime church members and newer audiences to experience worship in a shared space. This shift may seem subtle on the surface, but inside a large ministry like Lakewood, even small changes in style can influence how people connect with the message. For younger churchgoers especially, Jonathan's presence makes the environment feel more relatable and less distant. The music feels current, the energy feels familiar, and the experience becomes easier to connect with emotionally. Over time, Jonathan's role has expanded beyond just leading worship sessions. He is becoming more involved in shaping how the church expresses itself publicly. His influence is no longer limited to the stage during services, but is slowly extending into how Lakewood presents its message to a broader audience. What makes this development even more interesting is how Jonathan's presence contrasts with the massive legacy of his father. Joel Osteen has long been the central voice of Lakewood Church, known for his confident, uplifting messages that reach millions around the world. For years, Jonathan remained in that background, visible but not dominant. Now, however, that balance appears to be shifting. There is a growing sense that Jonathan is no longer just supporting the ministry, but gradually becoming part of its evolving identity. His involvement in worship leadership has opened doors for a different kind of influence, one that is less about preaching from the front and more about shaping experience, atmosphere, and emotional connection. And as his presence continues to grow, so does his connection with younger audiences who are looking for something more than traditional structure. Many of them are not just attending services, they are searching for meaning that fits into their daily struggles, questions, and realities. Jonathan's style seems to naturally align with that search. But this raises a deeper question beneath the surface. Is Jonathan simply modernizing worship within Lakewood Church? Or is he gradually stepping into a role that could reshape how the entire ministry operates in the future? Because the more influence he gains inside the church's emotional and spiritual experience, the more his voice begins to matter in ways that extend far beyond music alone. And as that influence continues to grow, it is beginning to spark reactions that reach far outside the worship stage, where public opinion is now starting to take center focus. When one voice triggers a nationwide debate. The moment Jonathan Osteen spoke about tithing, the response was immediate and explosive. What could have been a simple personal reflection quickly turned into a widespread debate that reached far beyond Lakewood Church. In a matter of hours, his words were being discussed, shared, and interpreted in completely different ways, depending on who was listening. For many supporters, Jonathan's comments felt refreshing. They saw his willingness to question long-standing church practices as a sign of honesty rather than rebellion. In their view, he was not attacking faith itself, but instead encouraging a deeper conversation about how faith is practiced in today's world. To them, this was not destruction, it was evolution. A large portion of younger believers especially resonated with his perspective. Many of them are part of a generation that is more open to discussing issues like mental health, inequality, and personal struggles within religious spaces. For them, traditional religious messaging that focuses mainly on prosperity and blessings feels incomplete. Jonathan's willingness to question tithing opened a door for a more relatable and grounded conversation about faith in everyday life. Some supporters even argued that churches like Lakewood need this kind of shift. They believe that faith should not only be about financial breakthrough or personal success, but also about emotional healing, community support, and social awareness. In this sense, Jonathan's comments were seen as a step toward making church more relevant to modern challenges. His openness also earned him praise for bravery. Speaking against a widely accepted belief within a major ministry is not something many people are willing to do, especially when it involves a globally recognized church like Lakewood. Supporters described him as someone willing to stand in uncomfortable truth, even if it means facing criticism. However, not everyone saw it that way. On the other side of the conversation, critics strongly rejected Jonathan's remarks. For them, tithing is not just a tradition. It is a biblical principle deeply tied to obedience, gratitude, and trust in God. Challenging it was viewed as dangerous, even disrespectful, to the foundation of Christian teaching. Some felt that his comments could weaken long-standing beliefs that have supported churches for generations. Others went further, interpreting his statements as a subtle rejection of his father's theological legacy. Joel Osteen's teachings on prosperity have shaped Lakewood Church into a global institution, and for many followers, that message is central to their faith experience. Any suggestion that questions its foundation naturally creates tension. There were also concerns about direction. Critics worried that Jonathan's views might push the church toward becoming too focused on modern social discussions at the expense of spiritual doctrine. Topics like mental health and social justice, while important, were seen by some as distractions from what they believe should remain the church's primary mission. This divide did not stay quiet for long. Media outlets quickly picked up the story, amplifying the controversy with headlines designed to grab attention. Phrases suggesting conflict, crisis, or division began circulating, often framing Jonathan's comments as a dramatic break from his father's teachings. As a result, what began as a discussion about belief turned into a public narrative of tension within one of the world's most famous churches. Interestingly, much of this media framing intensified the divide even further. Supporters felt Jonathan was being misunderstood or sensationalized, while critics felt the coverage confirmed their concerns. The story was no longer just about tithing. It had become about legacy, authority, and the future direction of Lakewood Church itself. And beneath all the noise, a deeper question began to emerge. Is this simply a disagreement over interpretation, or the early signs of a much larger shift happening inside the Osteen family's influence over the church? Because while the public debate continues to grow louder, the tension inside the family structure itself may be even more complex than what is being seen from the outside. And as the conversation escalates beyond public opinion, the focus begins to shift inward toward the Osteen family itself, where differences in belief and direction may be starting to take a far more personal turn. A family tension that could reshape Lakewood Church. Behind the public image of unity and inspiration at Lakewood Church, a more complicated question is beginning to surface. What happens when the next generation starts to see faith differently from the one that built it? Joel Osteen has long been known for shaping a message centered on optimism, success, and the belief that faith can lead to personal and financial breakthrough. This message helped transform Lakewood Church into one of the largest ministries in the world, reaching millions who are drawn to its uplifting and hope-filled teachings. For years, that vision remained the defining identity of the church. Now, however, Jonathan Osteen is beginning to introduce a different perspective, and it is quietly shifting attention toward a possible generational divide. His recent comments and evolving views on topics like tithing, mental health, and social responsibility are raising questions about whether he is simply expanding the conversation or subtly challenging the foundation his father built. Some observers see this as a natural transition between generations. In many families and organizations, younger leaders eventually bring in new ideas that reflect changing times. From this perspective, Jonathan's approach is not rebellion, but evolution. It suggests a church that adapts without completely losing its identity, but others interpret it differently. To them, Jonathan's willingness to question established teachings feels like a direct departure from the principles that made Lakewood successful, especially in a church where giving and prosperity theology play a central role. Even slight deviations in messaging can feel significant. This creates an underlying tension that is difficult to ignore. On one side is Joel's established legacy, built over decades of consistent messaging and global influence. On the other is Jonathan's emerging voice, which appears more focused on modern issues and the lived realities of younger generations. The contrast between the two is becoming more noticeable as Jonathan's influence grows. What makes this situation more complex is that it is not framed as open conflict. There are no public confrontations or direct disputes. Instead, the shift is subtle, expressed through tone, emphasis, and focus. Joel's message remains centered on inspiration and prosperity, while Jonathan's direction leans toward discussion, awareness, and social relevance. This difference in approach raises an important question. Is Jonathan preparing to take on a larger leadership role that could reshape Lakewood Church from within? Or is he simply carving out his own space while still respecting the foundation his father created? For Joel, the challenge is not only about leadership, but also about legacy. When a message that has reached millions begins to evolve within the same family, the stakes feel even higher. Any change is not just organizational, it becomes personal. At the same time, Jonathan's growing visibility suggests that his role may continue expanding. His influence inside the church is no longer limited to worship or commentary. It is gradually connecting to broader conversations about what the church represents and where it may be heading next. And as this quiet shift continues, one thing becomes increasingly clear. Lakewood Church may be standing at a turning point where tradition and transformation are beginning to overlap in ways that cannot be easily separated. Because what happens next inside the Osteen family may not only define their personal relationship with faith, but could also determine the future direction of the entire ministry itself. And as that tension lingers beneath the surface, the focus begins to shift forward toward Jonathan's growing vision for what Lakewood Church could become in a rapidly changing world. Will Jonathan Osteen transform Lakewood forever? As Jonathan Osteen continues to step into a more visible role, attention is now shifting toward what kind of future he may be envisioning for Lakewood Church. While the ministry has long been associated with messages of hope, success, and personal breakthrough under Joel Osteen's leadership, Jonathan's emerging perspective suggests a broader and more socially aware direction. His recent remarks about rethinking traditional practices like tithing are only part of a much larger picture. Rather than focusing solely on prosperity and individual achievement, Jonathan appears to be encouraging a more expanded view of faith, one that includes mental health, community care, and social responsibility. It is a shift that moves the conversation from personal success to collective well-being. For younger audiences especially, this direction feels more relevant. Many people today are searching for faith that acknowledges real-life struggles instead of only emphasizing positivity and financial blessing. Jonathan's approach seems to speak directly to that desire. By addressing issues like emotional health and social challenges, he opens the possibility of a church experience that feels more grounded in everyday reality. This evolving vision could also reshape how Lakewood interacts with the world beyond its services. Instead of being viewed only as a place of inspiration, the church could become more involved in active community engagement. That might include outreach programs, awareness initiatives, and a stronger presence in discussions about issues affecting modern society. However, this possible transformation is not without tension. A shift away from the traditional prosperity-centered message could create resistance among longtime members who strongly identify with Joel Osteen's teachings. For them, the church's focus on blessings, success, and faith-driven achievement has been a core part of their spiritual identity. Any change to that foundation may feel unfamiliar or even uncomfortable. Still, Jonathan's growing influence suggests that these conversations are unlikely to stop. As he continues to develop his voice within Lakewood Church, The balance between tradition and transformation becomes more delicate. The challenge is no longer just about introducing new ideas. It is about integrating them without losing the essence of what made the ministry powerful in the first place. What makes this moment especially significant is that it does not feel like an abrupt change, but a gradual unfolding. Step by step, Jonathan's vision is becoming more visible, and with it comes a quiet but undeniable question about direction. Is Lakewood Church simply evolving to meet the needs of a new generation, or is it slowly entering an entirely new era under a different kind of leadership influence? Because as Jonathan's ideas continue to spread through conversations inside and outside the church, one reality becomes harder to ignore. The future of Lakewood may no longer be defined by where it has been, but by where it is being led next. Thanks for watching. If this story surprised you, drop a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful updates. Check the next video on screen for more shocking insights.